Vladimir Putin is expanding the war against Ukraine and is ready to seize new territories. While the whole world is watching the war in the Middle East and the summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping, Vladimir Putin quietly signed a decree to distribute Russian passports to residents of Transnistria, the occupied territory of Moldova. If you think this is just a bureaucratic procedure, let me explain why this could be a prelude to something much more dangerous. After all, earlier in Russia, a law was passed allowing Vladimir Putin to send troops into any country to protect Russians. And intelligence has already warned that after Donbas, Vladimir Putin is ready to try to seize Odessa, which borders Transnistria itself. So, let's start with what exactly Transnistria is, because many people are just used to the fact that there's some kind of gray zone in Moldova, and that's it. And it's also important to remember that my episodes are translated into many languages, and it's important for everyone who will watch this episode to understand the context. So, Transnistria is a narrow strip of land between the Dniester River in Moldova and the Ukrainian border. Officially, it's a part of Moldova, which since 1992 has existed as a separate, unrecognized quasi-state with the support of Russia. The population there is officially about 350,000 people, mostly Russian-speaking. Russian troops have been stationed there since 1992, officially about 1,500 people. And there are also huge, just enormous Soviet ammunition depots there. And just recently, Vladimir Putin signed a decree that effectively opens a simplified path to Russian citizenship for all adult residents of Transnistria. That's tens of thousands of potential soldiers in the war against Ukraine. This move by the Kremlin is not new. It's not a new tool in its geopolitical arsenal, but rather a continuation of the so-called passportization policy that Russia has used for years to destabilize the post-Soviet space. Moscow already used similar scenarios in the summer of 2008 in Abkhazia and South Ossetia on the eve of the military invasion of Georgia, as well as in Donbas and Crimea before the start of the full-scale aggression against Ukraine. This is fundamentally important. It needs to be recorded as clearly as possible. Abkhazia and South Ossetia, 2008. First, Russia issued passports to local residents, then declared a threat to its citizens in these territories, then sent in troops and started a war. Crimea and Donbas from 2014 to 2022, exactly the same scenario. Russian passports, then a declaration of an alleged threat to citizens. Troops. Теперь вот Приднестровье. And here we are at the first stage, passports. What's next? The logic is obvious. Moreover, the State Duma of the Russian Federation has already prepared a legislative mechanism for the next step. On May 13 of this year, the State Duma of the Russian Federation finally authorized Vladimir Putin to send troops into other countries to protect Russian citizens. This is a law already in force, and the logic is as follows. Russian citizens in Transnistria, because you yourself handed out Russian passports to them, you now have a legal basis for military intervention. Sergei Shoigu, the former Minister of Defense of Russia and now the Secretary of the Security Council, has already made a statement that's important to note. Here is his quote. More than 220,000 Russian citizens live in Transnistria, whose interests and safety are threatened by the reckless and irresponsible actions of Kyiv and Chisinau. If necessary, Russia will take all necessary measures and use all available means to protect them. And most importantly, Shoigu adds, the rhetoric of the Moldovan leadership regarding Transnistria increasingly resembles the statements made by the Ukrainian authorities about Donbas after 2014. This phrase sounds more and more like the rhetoric around Donbas after 2014. This is the exact wording. This is exactly the rhetoric Russia used before invading Ukraine, word for word. The structure of the threat is identical, and those who followed the events of 2021-2022 should feel déjà vu. But it's important to stay level-headed here. Russia has a very serious problem with Transnistria. About 1,500 Russian soldiers are stationed in Transnistria. Only about 100 of them are actually Russian. The rest are local Transnistrians who were given Russian passports. They have their own homes and families there, and this is not a combat-ready expeditionary army corps. No, it's a garrison made up of local residents with Russian passports. Whether they are ready to actually go and fight is an open question. There is an even more fundamental problem. Between Russia and Transnistria lies Ukraine. Russia does not have a land corridor to its garrison. After 2022, Ukraine completely closed the border. The transfer of reinforcements by land is impossible. This means that if a real conflict breaks out, Russia will be stuck with 1,500 practically isolated soldiers who can't receive either ammunition or reinforcements. On the other hand, it's important to remember that recently Moldova presented a new plan for the reintegration of Transnistria. This is the first one since 2003, and here, when Shoigu talks about how, it turns out, Chisinau is behaving just like Kiev did after 2014, that's what he's referring to. That the territory needs to be returned and reintegrated into Moldova. Chisinau no longer considers Russia a negotiation partner, as it did before. As wild as it may sound, Chisinau used to consider Moscow a negotiation partner about what to do with Transnistria, even though the Russians occupied that territory. So, the document, that is, the plan for the reintegration of Transnistria, clearly states, and I quote, "The Republic of Moldova is the only subject of international law, and the territory of the Transnistrian region is an integral part of the Republic of Moldova." I should note that Moldova has left the CIS, adopted a military strategy until 2035, and named Russia as the main threat. And they have applied to join the European Union, but they still have the Transnistria problem. Well, this raises a question. Then what's the point of Russian passportization if a military option is really off the table? The answer is pressure. Psychological, diplomatic, informational and military pressure. So, Moscow is telling Chisinau, don't rush into this reintegration, you don't need it. And Moscow is telling the West, we have leverage in this region as well. It tells the domestic audience we're not giving up. We're expanding, have people everywhere, aren't bogged down in the war, and can still open another front. But it's also important to remember that Vladimir Putin is not giving up on his ambitions to control Kiev and Odessa. The British publication Financial Times, citing its own sources, published the Kremlin's position regarding Ukraine the day before. And according to journalists, the military command of the Russian Federation convinced Vladimir Putin that it is possible to capture the territories of Donbass and Luhansk region, and after that, Vladimir Putin plans to expand his territorial claims against Ukraine, including Odessa. In order to connect this land corridor with Transnistria. However, in what form these territorial claims will be, whether it will be political pressure or attempts at an offensive, is still unclear. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. If you want to support the work of this YouTube channel, you can do so with any donation using the links and details in the description of this video. I will be grateful for any support you can give. That's it for now, take care, goodbye everyone.